This is Hoped & Falls shot without a neutral density filter, frozen water and no mood. And this is the exact same scene, same composition 30 seconds later, this time with an ND filter. That silky atmospheric look isn't Photoshop, it's one piece of glass. But most photographers either haven't heard of them or they're too afraid to learn how to use them. Let's fix that. Hi there, I'm Samantha. I'm a professional landscape, wedding and portrait photographer, and I've been teaching for over a decade. ND filters are the single most underrated tool in a landscape photographer's kit, and most people don't know how or when to use them. By the end of this video, you'll know both. Let's start with what an ND filter actually is. An ND filter is like a set of sunglasses for your lens, just not the polarized version. It's a way of physically reducing the amount of light that goes into your camera. By reducing the light into the camera, you can then lengthen your shutter speed. And a longer shutter is what turns chaotic, choppy water into this. They sit as filters in front of your lens, and they're often stacked with a circular polarizing filter and other specialist ND filters. There are three types of ND filters available: square, rectangular drop-in filters, magnetic filters, and regular screw-on filters. Each type of filter system has its own advantages and disadvantages. I've owned them all, so let me save you some money. Let's start with the square filter system. The square filter system is a professional standard. It uses a filter holder that screws onto your lens, and you drop rectangular filters and square filters into slots. What makes it uniquely powerful is you can use graduated ND filters, where the darkness fades from the top to the bottom. Think about a bright sky over dark foreground. The graduated ND darkens just the sky while leaving the land alone. You simply just can't do that with a screw-on filter. You can also stack up to 3 filters without vignetting on most setups. And the system fits over bulbous lenses, ultra-wide lenses, none of which can take a screw-on filter at all. The downside, it's bulky and it's expensive. A full square system for a full frame camera will set you back over 1,000 Australian dollars, and it will take up real space in your bag. The magnetic system. Magnetic filters are the fastest system on the market. A base ring threads onto your lens once, and then every filter just snaps on and off magnetically. They're light, compact, and a full starter set costs less than a single square filter holder. The trade-off, most magnetic filters can't use graduated NDs. So if you're shooting dramatic skies over dark land or dark seas, you'll miss that control. And most of the magnetic systems can get knocked off if you're moving your camera or tripod. The one exception is Nissi's JetMag Pro, which has a locking mechanism. I love magnetic filters for my everyday work. The speed difference is genuinely meaningful when the light is changing fast, and space savings in my pack are a real game changer. However, for seascape photography, I always rely on my square filter system as I need the use of the graduated ND filters. Circular screw-on filters. Circular screw-on filters are the entry point. Thread it onto the front of your lens and you're done. No holder, no base ring, no fuss. And the advantages are that they can't be knocked off your camera under any circumstances. You can find cheap ones for about $40, but here's what nobody tells you. Stacking them is a nightmare. 2 filters stack and suddenly your wide-angle shots have black corners. They're slow to swap if the light changes, and there's no chance of using any graduated filters. They're also slightly bigger and heavier than using magnetic filter sets. If budget is your only constraint, start here. ND filters come in strength, measured in stops of light reduction. The 3 you'll actually use are 3-stop, 6-stop, and 10-stop ND filters. And if you remember one thing from this section, do not buy a variable ND filter for photography. Variable ND filters are brilliant for video, but photography, especially at wide angles, they can create dark crosshatch patterns across your image. It's unfixable in post. They're designed for shutter angle adjustments in video, not for long exposures. Stick with the fixed strength filters. Now, ND filters use multiple naming systems. A 6-stop filter is also called an ND64 or a 1.8, depending on the brand. It's genuinely confusing. I put together a free cheat sheet PDF that maps every common ND filter across these 3 naming systems. The link's in the description. Grab it and save it to your phone, and you'll never have to do the mental math in the field. Why buy an ND filter? If you shoot landscapes, especially water, seascapes, or anything with the sky, an ND filter isn't optional. It's the difference between an image that looks like a snapshot and one that feels intentional. Here's what an ND filter actually lets you do. Smooth flowing water, that misty ethereal waterfall look you've seen everywhere. Cloud movement, streaking across the frame during a long exposure. And 3, and this one surprises people, you can actually make crowds disappear. A 10-stop ND filter with a 30-second to 5-minute exposure renders moving people and cars invisible. It's one of my favourite tricks for shooting popular locations in the middle of the day. ND filters and the exposure triangle. Throughout this video, I've mentioned that we use an ND filter to lengthen the shutter speed in an image. But why can't we just turn the dial and set a longer shutter speed? If the image was correctly exposed prior to turning the dial to a longer shutter speed, then the image would become overexposed. Therefore, we need to reduce the amount of light coming into the camera to achieve a properly exposed image through either aperture or ISO. Normally, we would look at the exposure triangle to help us properly expose an image. The exposure triangle is composed of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. But ND filters allow you to step out of the constraints of the exposure triangle by reducing the amount of light that reaches the sensor, making them a 4th element to consider when we try to expose an image correctly. Because of this, I created the exposure square to allow you to visualize all the tools available to you. Let's look at this example. I arrive at this waterfall scene, and from experience, I know that I need a shutter speed of around 5 to 10 seconds to get the water in that stream smooth and silky looking. Let's say I set my ISO to 64, and for an aperture, I choose f11 for a decent depth of field. The camera meters this to a shutter speed of 1/30th of a second. To get from 1/30th of a second to more than 5 seconds is another 8 stops of light that I need to reduce. So how can I change this? I looked at the exposure triangle and determined that I need to adjust either my ISO or aperture. Based on these figures, I'm already at the lowest ISO for my camera, so I can't lower the ISO any further. So I closed down my aperture from f11 to f22, which is the furthest my lens will allow. That's a decrease of 2 stops of light. Now I'm 6 stops away from where I need to be. So I turn to the exposure square. That opens up another avenue to change exposure. If I've adjusted the shutter speed to 8 seconds and left the other settings at f22 and ISO 64, then the image would be 6 stops overexposed. But if I add a 6-stop ND filter, the image is now correctly exposed. An even easier way of doing this is to use the exposure calculator in the Photocells app. In the test settings, I put the same original metered exposure of f11, 1/30th of a second, and ISO 64. And I have calculate shutter speed selected. Now initially, in the equivalent settings section, I keep my aperture and ISO the same, and I scroll through the various ND stops till I find the shutter speed that I want. By scrolling through the stops of light, I find that I need to adjust my camera by 8 stops of light. From here, these are my options. 1, if I owned an 8-stop ND filter, I could use that. However, I've never actually seen an 8-stop ND filter. Or I could stop a 6-stop ND filter with a circular polarizing filter that I know loses 2 stops of light. Or I could change my aperture to f22, a loss of 2 stops, and add a 6-stop ND filter. Or 4, I could use any of the combination that decrease the light by 8 stops. Personally, I would normally stack the circular polarizing and 6-stop ND filter together, as I don't like the diffraction and loss of image quality that comes from using an aperture of f/22. When to buy an ND filter? So when should you actually buy an ND filter? Simple answer, when you want a shutter speed that your camera can't give you on its own. If you're at base ISO and your aperture is where you want it, and then the shutter speed is still too fast, that's your signal. If you're just starting out and you want to test the water without spending hundreds, the Nissi Circular ND64, that's a 6-stop ND with a built-in circular polarizer. It's a 2-for-1 filter. You get the 6-stop ND for the water, plus you get a circular polarizer for cutting reflections and boosting sky contrast. If you have a tighter budget than this, start with a 6-stop ND screw-on filter for about $40. If you're ready to invest, I recommend the Nissi JetMag Pro magnetic system. It's the only magnetic system I've found that physically locks the filters in place, so they won't get knocked off down the river when you bump your tripod. I learned this the hard way. And if you're going all in, the Nissi square filter system is what I use personally. The glass is genuinely colour neutral, so I don't have to fix colour casts in post, which saves me time in post. Over the years, I've bought and replaced every cheap filter system I started with. They either seized on my lens or left a colour cast I couldn't fully correct. Just like tripods, I recommend buying the best you can afford the first time. Just so you're aware, I have no affiliation with any brands, so all my advice is my honest experience. I've spent thousands of dollars on the wrong gear, and I want you to avoid some of the mistakes that I've made. One last thing. ND filters mean long exposures, and long exposures mean you need a tripod. Use a remote trigger or your camera's 2-second self-timer. Even pressing the shutter button introduces vibrations that'll soften your image. ND filters are the key to better landscape images, particularly useful for seascapes, waterfalls, and really any image that has moving water or clouds. They provide effects that cannot be adequately replicated in post-production and are the only method for achieving longer shutter speeds during the day. If you're hitting problems with your ND filters that I haven't covered, drop them in the comments. I read every one, and if there's enough, I'll do a full troubleshooting video. If you're interested in learning more about landscape photography tips, then hit the subscribe button, as I will be exploring a number of key photography techniques that are essential for landscape photography. I'm Samantha Olsen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.